Alright, welcome to part 2 of setting up a bioactive terrarium. So in this video, I will be completing the background, planting the tank, and doing all of that good stuff. So first we're going to start off with some cork bark that I bought Petco, and we are going to bake them at 250 degrees in the oven for, I believe I did this for an hour. So this just takes off any pests that might be on the bark, because I think I saw a small spider crawling off of one of the pieces of bark, and you never want to be too careful. So now I'm going to be cleaning down the tank with some rubbing alcohol just to make sure that it's all clean and that the foam we are going to use sticks nicely. So I had some leftover coconut liner from when I did a climbing background with my hermit crabs. So I'm just going to put that down, and I'm going to be incorporating it into the background to just give some different textures. We are going to start by using some silicone to stick down the coconut liner, and then we will go from there. This will just provide different textures so the crested gecko isn't just climbing on the foam parts all the time. And for this project, you are going to want expanding foam and silicone to make your background. I'm just configuring where I want to put everything, just confirming, and now I'm using expanding foams, gaps, and cracks. I want to say it's Great Stuff expanding foam. And I was trying to find one that I believe is called Pond and Stone, because the foam is black and I feel like that would have looked much better, but I couldn't find it, so we're stuck with this white foam, but it works really well. And so this is when I get myself stuck having to hold this log forever. And I'm going to do the same thing to myself, to where I have to hold the log in place to make sure that the foam dries around it. Now, admittedly, I could have used 2 cans of this stuff, but I only had 1 can and I wasn't about to go back to the store for a second one. So I ended up only using 1 can. But it pretty much served the purpose of how I wanted it. And when you're applying this, definitely remember that this foam is going to expand. So don't overdo it, because you will have to carve away however much you put down. Another thing is this foam is very hard to get off of everything, including your skin. So please do wear gloves. Be careful not to get it on you. I got some on my skin and it literally took forever to get some of it off of me, and it's just not a fun experience. The foam pretty much will dry in 8 hours, but I just give it a full 24 hours to cure. And now we're going to be carving away the foam, because when it first dries, it has a little bit of a smooth texture to it. And this just really isn't ideal for an animal to be able to climb up, and it's not going to adhere for the next step that we will be doing, which is covering the background in coconut fiber. So we're just going to go ahead and carve away and make it look more natural, because in the center I definitely had a lot of more buildup than I expected, because there was a huge chunk of wood that I needed to fill in the gaps with. So these videos are just going to be me carving this down. The carving process was really annoying. I just took a craft knife, aka an X-Acto knife, and I was just carving down with that. If you have a scraper, I would definitely recommend it, or any bigger objects to cut down the foam with, because there were some places that I had to carve so much foam and I couldn't really accomplish it to the best of my abilities, because I was trying to work with this small blade on the X-Acto knife. And also definitely do your best to cut out any air bubbles or pockets. You can kind of see some that I had to get rid of in this video, because when you apply silicone over them and then pack on the coconut fiber, they will be very hard to cover in and they might show through. So definitely do your best to carve out any of those. One thing that I feel like a lot of these videos on how to build these backgrounds didn't prepare me for is that there are some spots in the terrarium behind wood pieces that are very, very hard to get into. And so it was definitely hard sometimes to carve away that smooth part, and there's probably still some smooth parts in my terrarium, but of course it's live and learn. The more you do this, the easier it will become. So in this design, I made a nice little ledge up at the top, so I figured he could just lay in that little ledge area. So now I'm just taking the stick and I'm going to be siliconing it in afterwards and kind of poking it into the foam. This is a stick I found outside. I also baked it to make sure that there was nothing on it, because in Scotchy's old setup he had a bamboo stick that was like spring loaded and suction cupped to the side of the tank, and he liked to lay on top of it and sleep on it. So I thought I would incorporate something similar to that back into the tank because he really liked it, and this tank is for him, not for me. And you can see me watching a tutorial there, which I think is kind of funny. But I definitely was very careful and watched a lot of tutorials while doing this because I didn't want to mess it up. So now we're going to be taking some sphagnum moss and some leftover pieces of the coconut fiber that I just shredded up. And we are going to be adding those first just to give the background some extra texture so it's not all just one flat thing of dirt. And now I'm applying the silicone. And I will tell you, I started off with white silicone because that's all I had, and black silicone or brown silicone would definitely be much better. Even in the final results of the project, I can kind of see areas where the white silicone peeks through, and I would much rather have had black peek through. Now, unless if you're really fast at working, I would definitely recommend working in small sections instead of just trying to do overall. I think small sections work much better, but I tried to do it all in one go, and I don't think it turned out the best that it could have. But like I said, live and learn. Another thing is in this video I'm applying it with my hands at first. Later on when I get the black silicone, you will see that I am using a paintbrush. I definitely recommend a paintbrush over using your hand. It's just a little bit nicer. Sometimes you'll need to use your hands just to get in harder to reach places, but a paintbrush will keep it off of your gloves because your gloves, although it might not be on your hands, it's still on your gloves, so whatever you touch with your gloves is going to get covered in silicone. I feel like in every video this silicone looks so easy to smear, but it really isn't. It's kind of sticky and tacky and very hard to work with. So now I'm just adding that shredded up cocoa liner, and here I'm just adding some of the moss. This is sphagnum moss. Sphagnum, am I saying it right? And now we're going to add in the coconut fiber. Just dump it on there and then pack it in. So I ran out of my first tube of white silicone in this video, so it ended up taking me 2 tubes of silicone. Although to be fair, I only used like maybe not even a quarter of the second tube. And like I say, it took me one thing of expanding foam. So now I'm moving on to black silicone, which was way better. Working in smaller sections, definitely recommend. Working with a paintbrush, recommend. At this point, I'm really just detailing the whole thing, trying to make it look the absolute best that it can. Now I'm just dumping off any of the excess coconut fiber, and I'm just going to be able to reuse that later. Alright, and now I'm just going to be cleaning up the silicone. There are places where I accidentally would hit it into the wood. This is another reason why having black silicone would be so much better, because the white silicone is very eye-catching. Now for all the coconut fiber that I could not get up with my hands, I am vacuuming out. Now we are going to start making our drainage layer. I'm going to be using pea gravel. It is nice and cheap and they give you a lot of it. However, it does make the tank very heavy. So I believe I made a 2-inch layer of this pea gravel, which took a lot more than I expected. And I'm just smoothing it out each time I add some more. And now I'm going to be using window screen. And there's Scotchy. He was watching me the whole time I was doing this. So we're just going to cut that to be a little bit larger than the bottom of the tank, just so that it comes up on the sides a little bit to prevent any of the substrate from falling into the drainage layer and becoming putrid, which is basically just gross and oversaturated with water, and that can cause problems in your tank like mold. So now that we have that layer down, we're going to be adding in our charcoal. This charcoal layer will just keep everything kind of purified, prevent mold growth, and it will give our cleanup crew a little layer that they can live in. And for my cleanup crew, I will be using springtails. I do kind of want to start mixing some isopods, but I don't really know where to get them from. I bought the springtails from Josh's Frogs, and I was very nervous if they would be alive, but they were alive, and so I added a small layer of substrate, then I added in the springtails. For my substrate, I will be using a mixture of this coconut bark, which I believe is similar to reptibark, but I just needed a little bit of it instead of a huge thing of reptibark. So I'm just going to go ahead and make that brick. You just make them by putting them in some water, and then they will eventually break apart, just like a standard eco earth brick. Why can't I talk? There's that. Then we're going to be using some crushed up charcoal. Then we're going to be using sphagnum moss and of course some eco earth, which is just coconut fiber. And now I'm just mixing all of that into one big bowl. Or not, that's not a bowl, that is a bucket. And so for our plants, we have Ficus pumila, which is also known as creeping fig. And we have Fittonia. This is red vein, and I also have a white vein Fittonia. I can't remember the other part of the scientific name, but those are very beautiful plants. Then we are going to be using some silver pothos. These are just cuttings off of a main plant that I will be putting in there. I propagated them in water. Then we're just going to use some moss, not really sure what kind it is. And then a Sansevieria, which is also known as a snake plant or a mother-in-law's tongue. So these are going to be all of our plants for our terrarium. So we're just going to start by rinsing off all of the plants. We don't want any of the pesticides that could be on them or fertilizers because these are harmful to the animals and to our cleanup crew. So I'm just doing the best to clean all the dirt off of the roots and rinse off the leaves. And we are going to do this with all of the plants. And so now we are going to add in our substrate and start planting, which planting was such a nice process. It just feels like true completion of the whole project. Although things didn't go quite as planned, my log there that's kind of towards the bottom, it was higher up than I anticipated it to be, so it didn't work out the way I wanted to. But I mean, you just gotta work around your mistakes and learn from them. And so now you guys can just enjoy this soothing video of me planting and then viewing the tank afterwards. And so to make a planter up at the top, I actually took one of the pots that the plants were in and I cut off of a little bit of the rim and then just stuck it behind this piece of wood to create a nice planter at the top. So we have the silver pothos draining down. I put a little bit of the Fittonia in there as well. Then we have the creeping fig in the background that should climb up the background eventually. We have the snake plant front and center as Scotchy's favorite plant that was previously in his old tank. And the forest floor is just laid with a whole bunch of the Fittonia and some moss. Personally, I don't really like leaf litter, so by putting the moss down and just having a lot of floor coverage, it will still give the cleanup crew a nice place to live without having to do the ugly leaf litter, or in my opinion, ugly leaf litter. Then I have this little glass ball that's hanging there. It's from Hobby Lobby, and I just wanted to see if Scotchy would like to lay in it. I haven't really gotten any confirmed results of him laying in it yet. I guess we'll just see what happens. so now I will finally be taking off the protective covering on the front door. I will be dabbing some silicone onto the screw heads from our first video just to make sure that they don't rust. And there it is. But this project was definitely a lot of work. And it could be very frustrating at times, and so I'm definitely taking a break from doing another one for a bit. But I think it was worth it looking back, and watching this video it looks way easier than it really was. So if you're going to do this, definitely be completely committed to this project because it is a lot, just trust me. And so you see he has a place to hide on that side, and he has a place to hide on the other side behind the bark. And of course he can lay in the foliage at the bottom. So this is the old tank on the right, the new tank on the left. And now it's time to add in Scotchy. I'm not going to lie, he was not very impressed with it at first. Now he's settled in, and I think he likes it quite a bit. I did give the plants and the cleanup crew a month to settle in before adding Scotchy. That way it just wasn't a shock to their system and the plants weren't just trampled before they can establish their roots. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and maybe inspired you to make your own bioactive terrarium. And I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.